Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin, Daf Nun Zayin. This week's learning is sponsored by Efrat Avraham for the Fuash Nama of a very brave soldier, Itamar Avraham ben Meirav. Okay, we're going to get started. I will just make a short announcement, which is I sent out yesterday links to, I'll be speaking in Manhattan in KJ Shul on the weekend of February 28th, March 1st. So if anybody is in town, wants to join, there's a dinner, and then there'll be also a shiur after shul in the morning. There'll be a shiur after dinner, and also in the afternoon mincha time. So if anyone is in town or wants to come to town and be part of that Shabbat, everyone's invited. There's registration on the KJ website. You need a login to get in. So if you are not a member of KJ, you just have to email them, or there's a way on the screen to kind of say, we need a login to register. Okay, looking forward to seeing people there. It's always fun to teach in person, and obviously for those few days the Zoom will not be in session. I'll let everyone know who's on the Zoom which days I will not be teaching. Okay, with that we're going to get started. Obviously all the dafim will go up as usual, so don't worry. Okay, let's get started with our daf. We started yesterday with the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the Noahide laws. From that we got into, and Alana Steinhain Shiur will go up either today or tomorrow, really giving an overall idea about what these are all about. And also Shuli Mishkin's flashback was about the Bnei Noach. It's the topic. Daf Mishalahen this week was about it. First of all, it's a topic that spans a bunch of dafim, so it makes sense. We're going to be in them through Daf Nun Tet. And what we saw at the end of Daf was that there's two approaches to what the mitzvot Bnei Noach are. Which seven? Okay, we saw there were some people who thought there were eight. There were other ones that should be added. But here we have a debate about which are the seven. Debate Menashe says, take out dach, put in sach. So it was a good way to remember it, right? Even though the dach isn't so easy to help you remember. But the dach is take out dinim, take out the courts, take out the birkat Hashem, the cursing God, and put in serus, castration, and kilayim. Okay, and crossbreeding animals and trees. So now we want to know what are his sources, and that's what we're going to start now at the bottom of Nun Vav Amabet. Tana Debei Menashe Idarish Vayitzav. If you remember, the first seven we learned from Vayitzav, that pasuk commandment to Adam Arishon. We learned from every word we got to one of the seven. So if they darish Vayitzav, then afilu hanachnami, then you should have gotten to the seven we had before. And ilo darish Vayitzav, if he doesn't do Vayitzav, then hanaminale. Then where does he get them from? In other words, do we need to find some sort of pasuk that before, right, just in the time of Adam or Noah, people were commanded to do these things. So there's not too many commandments there. So how are we going to get there? So basically we say, okay, lo olam lo darish vayitzav. Clearly it doesn't darish in vayitzav. And there's a study guide today. You can look, there's a lot of charts that kind of chart these things out. Where do we get it from? Each one is listed separately. Okay, we're now going to find verses, except for the first two, which are listed together. But other than that, we're going to find verses for each one of the seven according to his list. So now let's go through. Avodah zarah v'gilui arayot, the first two on the list, not worshiping idols, and gilui arayot, forbidden sexual relations. Dichtiv, v'tishachet haaretz lifnei Elohim. Now this is in the destruction of the world in the Mabul, in the flood. It says in the world, the land was destroyed before God. Rashi says, what does this mean? Well, okay, in a minute we're going to get to the lashon of hashchata, includes avodah zarah and gilui arayot, and that's how we get there. But before that, you have to understand why this pasuk proves. We need to prove that they were commanded not to do something. Like Vayitzav Hashem was perfect. I mean, it wasn't perfect because it didn't really say all those seven things, but at least we could find a reference to it, and it was a commandment of God to Adam. Here, there's no commandment. This is just describing that the world was destroyed. But what they're saying is, Rashi says it very nicely, Midi anish alayu, from the fact that they got punished, shmami na'i pokod alayu. You can't get punished unless you were warned. So if they were punished for those two things, which we're now going to say, they were punished for avodah zarah and gilui arayot, which we haven't proven yet from the pasuk. Once you say, though, they were punished for those two things, you can say they must have been punished because they must have been warned. You don't get punished unless something was forbidden. Prove that it was obviously forbidden. Okay, even though it doesn't really say anywhere, right? You would think you need some sort of pasuk that says, don't do this. But okay. Now here, how we get from V'tishachet to Gilui Arayot and Avodah Zarah, Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, we're going to quote a braita now from the school of Rabbi Yishmael, Kol makom shneamar hashchata eno ela dvar ervav avodah zarah. Okay, anytime it says hashchata, it means erva, forbidden sexual relations, and avodah zarah, and idol worship. Devar erva shene'amar, how do we know this? Because, also from the pasuk about the mabul, ki shchit kol basar et darko. Okay, now derech is often used, darko, often in bi'ah. Like remember, there's bi'ah kedarka, lo kedarka. So the word darko, derech, eretz, often they understand it to mean like the way of the world, also sexual relations, even though it doesn't necessarily mean that. But there they get to that the mabul, right, they were destroyed. And here again, hishchit with darko, that means sexual relations. Forbidden ones. Avodah zarah, dechtiv, pen tashchitum v'asitem. Now we're jumping to a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim where it says, you will be destroyed if you, and the continuation is asitum kol pesel, you made idols and all that. So there you see this root in connection with those two things, and therefore that root of the word v'tishachet, when they were punished in the mabul, is proof that it must have been forbidden. Idach. Now, every time we're going to go through a pasuk, this is the proof for the Tana in the house of, from the school of Menashe that we found. Then we're going to say, what did the first Tana say about this? In other words, we're going to have to explain why they didn't learn that this is telling you about the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, and instead they learned it from Vayitzav. Well, what is that? What is that Tana going to say? Or Chayu de Kamagale. The pasuk's just telling you they were destroyed because they did these terrible sins. It doesn't mean that this is the source for why they were forbidden, right? That's the more normal way of reading the pasuk. It's just telling you this is what happened. Shvichut damim dechtiv shofech dam ha'adam. And this pasuk is also by Noach, and it says, right, this is after the babul, shofech dam ha'adam, if you kill a person, you will get killed. So there it's pretty clear, that's shvichut damim. Ve'idach katlayu dekamagale. The one who learned it from Vayitzav, from the word Adam there, right? That God was speaking to Adam, but we say Adam means don't kill a person. So what do they do with this pasuk? It's pretty clear. This is the pasuk. So they say, no, this pasuk is Katlayu Kamagala. They're just telling you, if you kill a person, you will get punished by death. But the commandment not to kill was already given before. They just weren't told you're going to get killed. Gazel. Okay, now we're up to theft. Dichtiv. Okay, these are the psukim that they start in the time of Adam, right? All they were allowed to eat was, they were vegetarians, basically. Then it starts to tell them, right, in Bereshit chapter 9, God tells them, Kol remes asher hu chai lachem yelochla, any creepy crawler you can eat. Ki yerek esev natati lachem et kol. Everything is given to you like the vegetables on the ground. Okay, we're going to darshan this in a minute. Then the next pasuk is, which we're also going to get to, so I'll read it now. Ach basar benafsho damo lo tochelu. But when something's alive, don't eat its blood. Okay, this is the forbidden, right? The prohibition to eat blood. So now we're going to darshan these psukim, though, a little bit outside the pshat. Ki yerek esev natati lechem et kol. V'amar Rabbi Levi, ki yerek esev v'lo ki yerek gina. God said, I gave you everything, right? In other words, you can now eat rimasim, creepy crawlers, just like you eat yerek esev. But notice, what are you allowed to eat? Stuff that grows on the ground, but not yerek gina. Yerek esev is like hefker stuff, things that don't belong to anyone, but not vegetables that grow in someone's private garden. And from there you see, can't steal. Again, it's a bit of a drasha. It's not like that's really what the pasuk is talking about. The idach, and the other one, right, is obviously going to read this pasuk in its simple reading. That pasuk is just trying to say you can eat meat, right? So it's just saying you can eat it just like you can eat yerek esev, but it's not trying to tell you anything about stealing. Aver menachai dechtiv. Ach basar benafsho damo lo tochelu. Now, they read this pasuk a little differently. This pasuk says, don't eat the blood of a live animal. But what are they going to say now? Or a live thing, right? People also. But they say, when the basar benafsho, which is damo, meaning when don't take basal, flesh, from something that has its blood running through it, meaning something that's alive. So don't take it from, right? And that you can't eat, which is an aver from a live animal. V'idach, what does the other opinion say? Who doesn't learn it from here? That pasuk is just coming to permit shratzim, right? Creepy crawlers, and it's saying right now, what's the connection to creepy crawlers here? Because the aver from creepy crawlers doesn't have the blood, like it's not the same thing. The blood there is attached to the flesh. It's not like they talk about how it's a different kind of thing, and there aver minachai is not really an issue. And that's why it talks about the dam. Okay. Serus, dichtiv, shirtzu ba'aretz, revuba. Now we get to the two that are unique to this time. So serus castration comes from shurtzu ba'aretz u'revuba, which is you're supposed to reproduce. So castration is the opposite of that. Yidach, what does the other opinion say? Lebracha ba'alma. That's just a blessing that you're going to reproduce and fill the world. But it's not, you cannot castrate. Kilayim. What about kilayim? Dichtiv ma'of leminehu. Okay, now think about it. If kilayim, you can't crossbreed animals, well, that's why Noach had to bring into the teva each type, right? Two of each type. Otherwise, they could have brought a few types and they would have crossed, right? Mated with each other, and it wouldn't have been a problem. So it must have been a problem, and that's why they went in the teva in pairs, male, female. If idach, this is a funny line. Idach hahulat savta ba'alma. No, it was just so they have a chevra. They need like friends in the teva. The horse generally, each one gets on better with the female of their type or the male of their type. So therefore they went in pairs, but not having anything to do with reproducing. A little bit of a stretch, that one, but okay. Now that was the first section. So the first section was to deal with this Tana's by Menashe, what's their sources and what, right? If they found sources for these things in those psukim, what about the one who learned it all from Vayitzav? Why didn't they learn it from these psukim? And each one we went through. I'm Rav Yosef. Now we get to a machloket about really what Rav held about the following thing, which we're going to see in a second. We're going to start with Rav Yosef, who says, Amre be Rav, they said in the house of Rav, al shalosh mitzvot benoach neherag. Okay, gesher siman, al gilor arayot, al shvichut amim, va'al birkat Hashem. Okay, there's three things that the ben Noach gets killed for: forbidden sexual relations, spilling blood, murder, and cursing God. Okay, you'll notice the siman is a little weird. It's gesher, gimel, shin. That works perfectly. Reish is the birkat Hashem. Before in the dach, we had it as kaf. Okay, so you see that there, and now birkat Hashem both has a reish and a kaf in it. You see that their way of using abbreviations was different than our way of using abbreviations. And this comes up, by the way, in the simanim all the time. They use simanim for rabbis using middle letters of their name or all sorts of things. Anyway, it was obviously their way of abbreviating was a little different. Either which way, we have these three things. That's the death penalty. Other than that, they don't get the death penalty for the other mitzvot b'nei Noach. So Mat Kavlar Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet said, what are you talking about? Bishlam shvichut amim. I get shvichut amim. That's the only one where it explicitly says you get killed. Remember, Noach is told, right? Daftiv shofech dam adam, damo yishafech. Your blood will be spilled. Okay, you get killed. Elahanach manalahu. But where do you get the rest of them from? And he basically says there's two possibilities. Either, and neither of them fits what you say. Either if you say, okay, look, shvichut amim is one of the seven, and shvichut amim you get killed. From there we learn what we call a binyanav. It creates the paradigm for all the others. Then afilu kulunami. Then you should say it for all seven, and that's not what you said. You said three. Imishum. Now we could find source for Birkat Hashem and for Giloy Arayot in the Psukim. What is that? You remember with Birkat Hashem we said it said ish, right? Who curses God gets killed. And ish, we said, includes a Gentile. So, imishum did rabim ish, and there's also a pasuk by Avodah Zarah, by Giloria, which we're going to get to very later on today, which is ish al kol she'er b'saro lo tikravu legalot ervani Hashem. Also, ish can't engage in forbidden sexual relations, and they're also in the forbidden sexual relations in the Torah. There's the death penalty. So we say, ish would be a perfect way to do it, except one problem. If you're going to learn from there, Avodah Zarah nami itrabu mi ish. There's also a pasuk by idol worship that says ish. Okay, that's in Vayikra chapter Kaf pasuk Bet 22, chapter 20, verse 2. El bnei Israel tomal ish mi bnei Israel u'minagera garber tapam. Then that's about the giving your child as a sacrifice to the Molech, which is the way they worship that idol. So you should say Avodah Zarah also. So whatever you're saying doesn't work, either all seven or four and not three. Elam Rav Sheshet, so Rav Sheshet basically changes Rav Yosef or fixes or says, this is my version of it. And Amrei Be Rav, I heard in the house of Rav, remember they're all arguing over what Rav said, Al Arba Mitzvot Ben Noach Ne'erag, and including Avodah Zarah. And that works perfectly. Then you learn Shvichut Amim from that pasuk. All the others you learn from their own context. Later on, to the Jewish people it was told, but it also says ish, which means it was also to Gentiles. But wait, we're going to have a question on that too. Who says a ben Noach gets killed on Avodah Zarah? V'hatanya, doesn't it say in a braita? B'Avodah Zarah, when it comes to the topic of Avodah Zarah, dvarim shebeidin shel Yisrael mimitim alehem. If it's something that a Jew would be killed for, ben Noach mushar alehem. A ben Noach is warned not to do it. Now, when you say generally someone is warned, it means they don't get killed, right? A Jew might get killed for this. At Ben Noach, it's just forbidden, but they don't get killed, it sounds like. Asara in mitalo. It sounds like they just get warned not to do it, but not that they get killed. So we have a problem, but Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, this time we have an answer for the problem. Azhara shelahen zoi mitatam. When we say they're warned, the Gentiles are in a different track than us. We have a track that says if you don't have a punishment, a pasuk that says warning, this is forbidden to do, and a pasuk that says if you do this, you will get this punishment, then you don't get punished. Okay, there has to be both an asara and a punishment pasuk. But for Gentiles, for the Ben Noach, it's enough just to have a warning. That's enough. Okay, we're going to see all sorts of criteria later that are different. Okay, theirs and ours. That's going to be a main topic of today. Rav Huna bar Yehuda v'kulu tamidei de Rav Amri. Now we get to a third approach. We have Rav Yosef 3, which we kind of raised a problem with and we didn't answer. Rav Sheshet has 4. We had a side question, but we resolved it. The Ben Noach really does get killed for Avodah Zarah. And now we have Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, v'kulu talmidei de Rav Amri. Okay, now we have Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, and all the students of Rav, who are now basically coming to say something different than what they said until now in the name of Rav. Al sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach ne'arag. They get killed for all 7. Galei Rachman b'chada v'odin lekulu. The Torah expressed it by 1, shvichut amin, murder, and from there we learn to all the others. Okay, now we're going to have a question on this one. V'ala gezel b'noach ne'arag, but they get killed for stealing, okay, which is a little strange, right? Murder, death penalty for stealing, but not only are they asking that, not from that perspective, but because of what it says in the following braita. V'hatanya, ala gazel, okay, this is gazel, which is the topic of theft of the Ben Noach, colon. Ganav v'gazal v'chein yefat toar v'chein kayotze behen. Okay, now here's some rules. And here we're going to distinguish between if a Gentile does it to another Gentile or to a Jew versus if a Jew does it to another Gentile. Okay, this is going to be one of those sugyot where you have to take a deep breath and say, this doesn't sit with us well from an ethical, moral perspective, that for a Jew to a Gentile, we're going to see that the laws are much less strict. That there's certain things we can do to Gentiles and kind of get away with it, as you say. Okay, we're going to see the difference. Some will be forbidden, but you might not get punished. Some are going to be permitted entirely, and it's going to not sit great with us. Now, I'll just preface all this by saying, okay, they're going to call it kuti. Some versions, I don't know what version you have in your text, might have goy, might have nechuli, might have akum. Now, the Meiri had akum in all these sugyot, and the Meiri is very famous for saying, living in Provence in the I think 1300s, and basically in a society that was mostly Christian, basically puts aside all these sources by saying we're only talking about pagans, and all this is pagans because pagans lived in a society that was culturally, abhorrent to the Jewish people, and therefore they're in a different category. But it's not the same for Christians and other Gentiles, basically. And he basically neutralizes all these sugyot, which for us, reading that sits a lot better with us. So anyway, we're going to see also another thing I want to point out is that right now we're going to see that stealing from a Gentile is actually totally fine. But if you remember, we learned that Mishum Darkei Shalom, you can't do it. Okay, so even though the legal law is this, but the rabbis changed that also because it caused hatred and, it just didn't seem right. So they also changed that somewhat. But anyway, going into this sugya, I had to give that intro. Now we're going to go into it and learn the complicated, what it does say in the text. Forget about how we can possibly explain it. Okay. So now our question is Ben Noach neharag on gezel? Look at this source. This source says, ganav v'gazal, if you steal, or right, kind of gnev or gzela, okay, 2 different types of robbery, v'chein yefat toar, and likewise, a woman who's taken captive in a war, there's a whole rule about what a Jew can do when they take captive a woman in war. They have to go through a whole process, let her hair grow long, all this, and then eventually they can marry her. Now, v'chein kayotze behen, and other things that are like this. We're going to have to later explain what on earth is like gezel, what is like yefat toar. We'll get back to that after we deal with what we're here for. Now, we haven't said anything yet. This is just the title. Ala gezel ben Noach neharag. I'm sorry, I just went back a line by accident. Kuti b'kuti, v'kuti b'Yisrael asur. So ganav, gazal, yefat toar, all these things, a kuti to a kuti is not allowed. A kuti who either steals from a Yisrael or a Jew, or takes a yefat Torah of Yisrael, asur. Okay, these things are asur. But Yisrael b'kuti mutar. So a Jew who steals from a kuti is permitted. Okay, here it says it, blank out, permitted. You can do it. Not just you don't get punished. You can do it. Okay, this is what I told you, right? Either it only applies to really Ovdei Kochavim pagans, or also, if you remember, the rabbis eventually forbid this, but Mikar Din, like the letter of the law, it's permitted. So there's a difference, okay? Now, what does this prove? In Ita, if a kuti was supposed to get killed, now what does it say? Kuti b'kuti, if a kuti steals from another kuti, or a kuti b'Yisrael, or again, any Gentile steals from another Gentile or a Jew, it's forbidden. It doesn't say you get the death penalty, right? In Ita, if you get the death penalty, chayav, right? There's different language we use. Forbidden, permitted is not the same as you get the death penalty. So they say, oh no. It really does mean chayav. Forbidden could mean you get the death penalty, but what? Well, in the end, they wanted to tell you that a Jew actually is permitted to steal from a Gentile. So because there, they could only use the word permitted, because if you said the word patur, exempt, what does exempt sound like? You don't get punished, but it could be forbidden. So they couldn't use that word there. They had to use mutar. Therefore, in the beginning, they used asur, even though really asur means asur and you're liable. And that's how they resolve the problem. But they have a question on this answer, which is, wait, but in that same source and anywhere, usually, if you want to say you get the death penalty, it says chayav. So, in fact, the Katani Reisha, the beginning of that source says the following. Al shvichut damim, when it comes to murder, okay? Usually someone murders, they get murdered. So who does this apply to? Kuti b'kuti, a Gentile who kills a Gentile. Kuti b'Yisrael, a Gentile who kills a Jew. Chayav, okay? They're going to get the death penalty because Ben Noach is commanded about shvichut damim. We saw that with Noah, right? Yisrael b'kuti patur. This is also very difficult. A Jew kills a Gentile, they don't get the death penalty. Now here it says patur, notice, right? Exempt from the death penalty. So the Gemara says, there you in our case, you had to say asur and mutar because of the mutar to know that it's totally permitted to steal from a Gentile. At least here there's a distinction, right? Here you couldn't say asur and mutar because it's not mutal. Okay, now here even though you won't get the death penalty for killing a Gentile, but it's for sure not permitted. How do we know that, right? So, what were they going to do otherwise? In other words, in our case, you had to say asur mutar. In the theft case, in the murder case, the only way to say it was chayav and patur because Tanya, it says in a braita, kutim v'ro'ei behemah daka lo ma'alim v'lo moridim. Here it's interesting. They put the ro'ei behemah daka. Remember the shepherds who steal other people's stuff? Even though they're Jewish, they're putting this crazy. It's crazy that they put them in this category. But lo ma'alim, you don't have to. If they're stuck in a pit, and we're going to learn all about when we get to Ayin Gimel about our responsibility to save a person. Someone's in a pit. If they're a kuti, a Gentile, or ro'eh behemah daka, which we think of as not a good person in society, we do not have to go out of our way to save them. But lo moridim, but we can't throw them into a pit. Okay, we're not allowed to kill them actively. So therefore, they had to use the language there of exempt and liable because exempt is the only word to use. It's not like it's mutal, permitted to kill a Gentile. So again, this raises a lot of difficult questions that really we have a different standard. You have to remember, these really come from the whole re'echa, like certainly in the Gezel case. You can't steal from your friend or achicha, which the Torah says, Jews, fellow Jews. Okay, but still that doesn't answer the question. Just raises why the Torah says that. Okay, now, kayotze bo begezel. Now, so we resolved the issue that you could have death penalty for gezel, even though there it just says asur. Asur could mean asur and you're chayav. Now we have to understand what's this kayotze bo begezel, and then what is kayotze bo in the yefat toar. So kayotze bo begezel ma'hi. We're going to have three possibilities. And we're going to reject the first two. A worker in a vineyard, that would be like gezel if they steal the food while they're working. So the Gemara says, po'el b'kerem meimat. When? At what point? If it's when the fruits are already ripe, we learned it's mutar, that the Torah tells us you're allowed to eat while you're on the job. If it's not that time, then gezel ma'al yehu. Well, then it's clearly theft. We need to find something that's like theft. So that doesn't work. Second option. If you steal less than a pruta's worth. So then we're going to say it's like gezel, because gezel is really stealing something of value. Here we're going to say we're talking about something that's less than a value, really, of anything. So we hachi kuti b'Yisrael asur harbar mechilahu. But wait, it says if a kuti, if we say kayotze behem begezel, there's this distinction between Jew and Gentile. So now we're going to say if a Gentile steals from a Jew a less than a shava pruta, they're liable, but right, it's forbidden. But why is it forbidden? The Jew, it can be mochel. Okay, the Jew can say, I don't care. That's such a little amount of money. It doesn't bother me. So why would it be forbidden for the Gentile to do it? If the Jew in the end is just going to say, oh, it's so not worth it, right? Someone steals a penny from me. What, I'm going to care? So they say, well, Noahide batar hachi machile. Now, while it's true that eventually I will have mechila and I will say, I don't really care. But Sarah b'shate milele. If that person came into my house and stole something, at that moment when I hear they steal something, even if I know it's just a penny, it's a violation. It's upsetting to me. Because of that, it's forbidden for them to do it. Okay, so even though maybe there will be mechila, it doesn't matter. Okay, that could be a possibility. Now we're going to bring a third possibility. No, sorry. Now we're going to raise a question on that and knock it out. Kuti b'kuti kayotze behen. Wait, if that's the case, then a kuti b'kuti with a pacham mishava pruta is going to be liable. The assumption here is that there's a difference between a Jew can do mechila, a Gentile is mechila isn't considered anything. Well, if the mechila of a Gentile isn't considered anything, then less than a shava pruta should be really theft and not like theft. And therefore, this option doesn't work. So third possibility, someone who doesn't pay their workers on time. That's like stealing. And again, we're going to have this distinction. Now we're going to explain the source according to this distinction. Kuti b'kuti b'Yisrael asur, Yisrael b'kuti mutar. Okay, there's no problem of delaying payment of your workers to a Gentile. There is a problem if it's a Jew to a Jew, or a Gentile to a Jew, or a Gentile to a Gentile. Okay, kayotze b'yefat toar mahi. What about, okay, now we have to explain what's like yefat toar. First of all, yefat toar is such a strange thing. What could be like it at all? But anyway, now they're going to try to explain. So when Rav Dimi came from Israel, he brought over the tradition of what this meant. If a ben Noach has slaves and basically connects one to the other and says, listen, you're going to be miyuad, is what they say, kind of like a marriage. They don't really have marriage slaves, but you're going to mate with each other, but nothing yet transpired. He just designated them to be for each other. And then the ben Noach, the owner, then sleeps with this woman. That's kind of like a yefat toar. Okay, it's not exactly, but it's similar. And that would be a case where we'd be saying that, again, if he did it to a Jew or he did it to a Gentile, right, it would be forbidden. But if a Jew did that to a Gentile, it wouldn't be forbidden. Okay, again, difficult to explain why it wouldn't be forbidden, but okay. Now they just point out that if you notice, the braita had two parts. It had the part about gezel and it had the part about yefat toar, and it said kayotze behen. And it also had the part about shvichut damim, about murder, but there it didn't say kayotze, right? Like murder. Okay, what could be like murder? So they just point out it doesn't say that by murder. Now, Abaye, imishkacha detanya. Well, he says, listen, if it would have appeared in the braita, I could come up with an explanation of where we would have something that's like murder, that we're going to have a different standard for Jew to Gentile than Gentile to Gentile, Gentile to Jew. So what would that be? Detanya, Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul he says, sorry, I didn't read that right. Imishkacha detanya, it would be Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul. You could say then the braita would be, according to his theory, detanya, as it says in the braita, Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul omer, right? Very famous halacha. If someone is chasing someone else, and we're going to get to this really when we get to rodef in a few weeks, a rodef, someone who's chasing someone else to kill them, and you see them and you try to stop that person, you're allowed to kill them, but only according to Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul if you can't shoot them in the leg or somehow stop them without killing them. If you will be killed for that. Now, again, we're going to say there's a bit of a double standard or different standard, where again, we're going to say Gentile who kills a Jew who's chasing someone, Gentile who kills a Gentile who's chasing someone when they could have shot them in the leg will be killed. Jew who kills Jew also will be killed. But Jew who kills Gentile in this kind of situation, instead of shooting in the leg when they could have shot them in the leg, doesn't get killed. Okay, that would be the difference. So he was just suggesting. Okay, it doesn't say it anywhere, so it's not really the case, but he does say that. Okay, we're now on Amud Bet, starting at the top. Now we're starting another topic within our topic. Eshkach Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha dav k'tiv b'sefer Agadita debei Rav. So Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha finds this text written, okay, which was a braita from the house of Rav. Ben Noach neherag b'dayan echad u'be'er echad shelo b'hatcha'a mipi ish v'lo mipi isha v'afilu karov. All sorts of rules that were much more lenient when it comes to a court case of a Ben Noach. So they could get killed by one judge. Okay, now we need 23, right? A court of 23. One judge is enough. One witness is enough. Don't need to be warned from a man. Okay, this is the only one that we keep the same standard, and I wonder why, I don't know. But only a man's testimony is accepted against them, not a woman's. Okay, now I say I don't know. Soon we're going to see the text. They're going to learn it from a drasha. But again, these things you'll see. The drasha is weak. It's clearly it was known, and they just find a way to connect this all to a pasuk. Okay, this in general is a hard concept for us. Okay, another hard concept from today's stuff, which is why women can't testify even to this day in a beit din. It's very hard, right? Only for certain things they'll accept women's testimony. Very difficult for us to swallow, right? Forget about women in minyan, right? Women in testimony, what? We can't testify about something? So it's a hard topic. I don't have any good answers to that question. Okay, so anyway, we're going to continue. Vafilu karov, even a relative is allowed to testify against them. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael amru afala ubarin. And in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, they passed on even if a Gentile kills a fetus. Okay, basically, remember we learned that case where the two men are fighting and there's a pregnant woman in the way and she gets hit. If she doesn't die, but the fetus is no longer, then normally the Torah says you pay money for the value of the fetus, but a Ben Noach will be killed for that. Okay, that's what he says here. That's the extra halacha of Rabbi Yishmael. Not Tanna Kama doesn't agree. Minah Amar Rav Yehuda Damar Kra. By the way, this is a sugya we're going to get into more when we get to Rodef and about like a fetus that's causing the death of the mother, and how Judaism perceives fetuses. Right here, there's this whole machloket: is a fetus really a life or is it not a life? Okay, it's a big, It's a big public debate nowadays about abortions. So we'll have more time to deal with the Jewish, what the Gemara has to say about it. Here you have a machloket. So anyway, Menani, Mili, where do we get all these things from? So now we're going to quote this pasuk. I'm going to read you the whole pasuk. It's Breshit Tet, again, that chapter with all those things about killing people. You can't murder. This is the pasuk just before that. Right? I will demand your blood, meaning if somebody kills you. Miyad kol chaya, from any animal who kills you, edrashenu, I will demand it. It's a very weird pasuk. It's hard to understand the simple reading here. What, like God's going to kill the animal if the animal kills you? Perhaps. Umiyad adam, miyad ish achiv edrosh ed nefesh adam. Okay, from a person, and again it says from a person to his brother. It's not so clear how to read this simple reading, right? I will demand the soul of a person. Okay, so now we're going to darshan this very strange pasuk with a lot of seemingly extra words. So Rabbi Yehuda says, edrosh. Edrosh is singular. Now, obviously, it's God who's the subject here. But I'm going to say, edrosh, afilu b'dayan echad, even one judge. Miyad kol chaya. This sounds like an animal's responsible also if the animal kills. Now, can you warn an animal? No, it has no meaning. So there you learn, afilu shelo b'hadcha. Clearly, warning is not important here. Edreshenu umiyad ha'adam. Now, this does this tactic they do in drashot, which is don't stop where there's a comma, but connect words that really are different parts of the different phrases. So it said in the pasuk, miyad kol chayad reshenu, right? I will demand the blood of this dead person from every animal, umiyad ha'adam, and from any human. So now they tarshon like this, edreshenu umiyad ha'adam. Okay, so how do we read that? I will demand it even in the hands of one person, meaning afilu be'ed echad, even with one witness. Again, that's not the simple reading, but it's a way to darshan it. Miyad ish v'lo miyad isha. Here's where you get not the woman, okay? Because it says a man. Achiv afilu karov. Your brother sounds like even a relative. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael amru afalu barim. So now we want to get to this fetus. My time at Rabbi Yishmael. Where does he get it from? The next pasuk. Dichtiv shofech dam ha'adam be'adam damo yishafech. So if you spill the blood of a person in a person, now here they say, what does this mean? Ezu adam shu be'adam. Where do you have a person in a person? That's a fetus in its mother's womb. Okay, again, it's a way of reading this pasuk, not exactly the way it's supposed to be read, but someone who spills the blood of a person who's in another person, which would obviously only be a fetus. V'tanakama. Now the Tanakama who doesn't hold the ubar, how does he read this pasuk? He reads this pasuk in a totally different way, for a totally different drasha, and we're going to go back to, not really back to, but Tana de Menashe. We're going to go and repeat, or not repeat, we're going to go back to the Tana de Menashe, but this is not the same braita. The braita we saw of Tana de Menashe that we started with was all about different 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, right? He switched to the dach and the sach. But here we're going to get to a different opinion that also was found in the house of the Menashe, the braita from there, Damar, and it's basically going to use those words to darshan something else. That word be'adam is not going to be inside another person. It's going to be used for a different drasha. Okay, now we said before, sayif is the way we kill the ben Noach with the sword, but, right, decapitating. But now he has a different opinion. It's strangulation. Where does he get it from? He puts the be'adam not connected to shofech dam ha'adam be'adam. He says shofech dam ha'adam, someone who kills a person. Be'adam damo yishafech. Now, what does this mean? Be'adam damo yishafech v'darish be'hachi. Be'adam damo yishafech ezu shvichut damim shel adam shu begufo shel adam hevei omer zachenet. The be'adam goes to the punishment. Damo yishafech is the person's blood will be spilled, meaning if you kill someone, you will be killed. You will be killed. How? Be'adam, inside your body, meaning no blood's going to spurt out. And that happens through strangulation, not through sayif, the sword, where blood will spurt out. But it's an internal death. Okay, it's still in the adam. And that's why they don't darshan the ubar from there, because they darshan the pasuk in a different way. Okay, so that was the next section of our daf, which was this agadata they found with Beirav, this source that talked about all these unique halachot, where it's much easier, basically, to convict ben Noach than it is for a Jew. Now we're going to have 3 questions on this. I would preface this by saying the questions are a bit not so clear that you would get to these questions on your own. Okay, each one's a bit of a stretch in a different way. We'll see them right now, but in any case, we're going to learn them and answer them. Mativ Rav Hamnuna, first question. V'ishalo mipakta. A woman's not commanded to set up courts. Now, no one said the woman's not commanded to set up courts. They said the woman can't testify, but they assume if the woman can't testify, then she's just not part of the court thing at all. If she's not part of the court thing, then she's not commanded that first commandment of setting up courts. And v'haktiv, how could you say that? It says, ki dativ l'manashe yitzaveh. Now, what was that pasuk? That was the pasuk that told us about setting up the courts by Avram. And it said, the Avram commanded et banav ve'ed beito, his sons and his household. Household usually means wife. And then it says, Shamru derech Hashem lasot tzedakah u'mishpat. And that's what we learned, justice and a court system. So how can you say women aren't part of this? To which hu motiv lavu mefarik la, he brought the question. He answers it, banav lidin, beito litzedakah. The men are in din, the women are in tzedakah. There was mishpat and tzedakah. Now what's tzedakah? Good question. Some people say it really means literally charity. They're supposed to give charity, but not that they're supposed to set up courts. Some people say no, the men have din, the women have the pshara, the compromise. Interesting theory. And then it shows that compromise, we had a whole discussion about compromise at the beginning of the Sheshet. Is it like a different track of din, or is it something entirely different? This sounds like it's something entirely different because it doesn't have witnesses and judges and all those things that women can't be part of. It's a whole different realm, and there women do have a place, which is an interesting theory also about women having some sort of place in that system. Anyway, something to think about. Second question. Amarle Rav Avia Sabale Rav Papa. Ema bat Noach sharga lo tehareg. Again, this is a little weird, but we're going to make a jump here. We're going to say, perhaps you can infer from here that a female, right, a bat Noach, is who kills doesn't get killed. Why? Because miyad ish v'lo miyad ish aktiv. Now, the way we darshan miyad ish was who can testify, but we're assuming here the miyad ish also could be referring to who did the killing. And there it says man and not woman, so maybe a woman wouldn't be liable. No, it says anyone who spills blood, and it doesn't say there a man who spills blood. It just says one who spills blood. That includes everybody, and therefore, of course, she's going to be liable. Third question. Maybe if she commits adultery, she won't be killed. Now we're going to a different pasuk we didn't even discuss yet. But since we're already talking about women being exempt from certain things, maybe she, as a married woman, sleeps with someone else, right? Commits adultery. She's not liable. Why? Dechtiv, there's an interesting way to darshan this pasuk. Al ken yazov ish v'lo isha. Famous pasuk in Bereshit after the creation of man and woman says, right? Therefore, right, because she came from the rib of man, eventually man will leave his father and mother, v'davak bishto, and will cling to his wife. And notice the subject of that sentence is man, meaning that the whole cleaving to the marriage thing is that the man is cleaving. And if the man, right, gets connected to his wife and then basically breaks that by committing adultery, he should be liable. But maybe again, obviously in Torah law, women are liable as well. In fact, women are usually worse. The eshet ish is always worse. Anyway, but perhaps the Noahide laws, it's just the man. That's what they're suggesting. To which they say, no, Amar le, hachi Amar Rav Yehuda. They keep quoting Rav Yehuda here, this is the last two. Vayula basar achad, hadar irvinu kra. When it says, and they will become one flesh, that brings her back into the subject, because the two of them together become like one, and therefore she's also forbidden sexual relations, just like he is. Okay, now we're going to go into a braita. It's going to take us to the end of the daf, a diyun about this braita. Ish, matam alomer ish. L'rabot tetakutim shemusarim al arayot Yisrael. Now we're going back to the pasuk about ish by arayot. It says, ish again. Now, ish, what did we say, includes Gentiles. So now we're going to have a big question about this. So they say ish to include, again, kutim or Gentiles, whatever word you use, that are musharim al arayot Yisrael. They're warned not to do arayot just like Jews. The Gemara asks, just like we asked with the Birkat Hashem. What about that first pasuk? We learned all 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. Already they're commanded by Yitzav at the Dam, right? And it said lemor we said was Giloi Harayot. So why are they commanded a second time? So again, the second time is going to have to add something else. Hatam ba'arayot didhu, v'hacha ba'arayot didan. There it's talking about the arayot of theirs, and here it's talking about the arayot of ours. Now this is a little confusing. We're going to have to figure out what this means exactly, but it's going to be a difference. If a Gentile sleeps with a Jewish woman, then we're going to judge them in our system. If they sleep with a Gentile married woman, we're going to judge them in the Gentile, according to their system. How do we know this? Dikatani Seifa, and that's how do we explain this? Baal arayot Yisrael nidom b'dinei Yisrael. They sleep with a woman who's forbidden, who's a Jew. They're judged in the Jewish courts. Lemay hilchata. What's the ramifications here? Whether it's a judged by the Gentile rules or by the Jewish rules, right? By the Noahide laws or the Jewish. Well, Amrav Nachman Amrav Refuah lo nitzka ela le'idav edim v'hatra. It means that if they have relations with a Gentile married woman, then we're going to have, right? They don't need edah, edim, and hatra. All those 3 things. They don't need 23 judges. They don't need 2 witnesses. They don't need to be warned. So the Gemara says, Mikra Gara, wait. But if they have relations with a married woman who's a Jew, we're going to make it harder to convict? That doesn't make any sense. It should be easier. So that's not a good answer. So El Amar Rabbi Yochanan lo nitzcha ela l'nara murasa. What it means is if they sleep with a betrothed Jewish woman, they're going to get stoned in our courts. Why? In their laws, they don't have such a thing because there is no erusin. What is erusin? It doesn't mean you're engaged. Like nowadays, we're engaged. That's not a nara murasa. Engagement means there was a birkat kiddushin, right? They did an act of a halachic act that Gentiles don't do. So there's no such thing. If they're engaged, that doesn't mean they're engaged the way we have it. So therefore, they'll be judged. And that's the difference. Gemara asks, Vahatanya, Baal Nara Murasa. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. Aval eshet ish bedina didhu dainina lehu. Wait, so if they have relations with a Jewish woman, it's going to be in their system, which would mean what? What punishment? Saif. Remember, they get cherif. If it's our law, we get chenek. So you'd assume it would be saif. So now, vahatanya, but it says in a braita, Baal nara murasani dom b'skila, like Rabbi Yochanan explained. He'll get stoned. Al eshet ish, but if a Gentile sleeps with a married woman who's a Jew, nidom b'chenek. Strangulation, that's our law also. The ibetana didhu, bedina didhu, if it's their law, sayifu, should get the sword. So Amrav Nachman bar Yitzchak, right, decapitated. Amrav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my eshet ish tekatane, kigon shenichnesal chupa v'lo nivala. So he says, that case where they said chenek wasn't a regular case. It's a case of a woman that was married but didn't have relations yet with her husband. Now, if we judge them in their court, for their courts, that wouldn't be considered married. Gentiles, this Ben Noach, they only are considered married after they've done a marriage ceremony. Because again, what's a marriage ceremony? It's the bi'ilah, it's the consummation of the marriage in sexual relations that causes the marriage to be a marriage. In Jewish law, it's the chuppah, basically. So if that case would be, it would have to judge in our law, because in their law, they don't have such a thing. She wouldn't be considered married according to their law. Okay, so if this Jewish woman was married but hadn't yet had relations with her husband, and the Gentile sleeps with her, in our courts they'd be liable, in their courts they wouldn't be. That's why you would have to judge that by us, and that's how we understood that braita to resolve the difficulty. Titane Rabbi Chanina, as Rabbi Chanina says, okay, they have only if she's have relations with her husband. They don't have, and it doesn't have any meaning if she's married without having had relations. And Tanya Kavatei to Rabbi Yochanan. Now, Rabbi Yochanan said the main difference was Nara Murasa. Now we're going to see a braita that supports this. Kol erva shebetin shel Yisrael mimitin aleha ben Noach mushar aleha. This is like we saw with Avodah Zarah. If in a beitin of Jews you would get killed, the ben Noach is forbidden to do this. Ein beitin shel Yisrael mimitin aleha. But if the Jewish court wouldn't give you the death penalty, ein ben Noach mushar aleha divrei Rabbi Meir, then the ben Noach wouldn't be liable. This isn't the part that's like Rabbi Yochanan yet. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Chachamim omrim. What are you talking about? Harber ayot yesh ein beitin shel Yisrael mimitin alenu ben Noach mushar alehem. There are cases where the Jewish court you wouldn't be liable, but in a court of Ben Noach you would be. And here's an example: Baal arayot Yisrael nidon b'dinei Yisrael. Baal arayot. Oh no, this is just another thing. Sorry. Baal arayot Yisrael nidon b'dinei Yisrael. If you have relation, here we're going back to our original law. This is the braita showing it. If you have relations with an arayot of Yisrael, then you're judged in a court of Yisrael. Baal arayot Ben Noach nidon b'dinei Noach. But, and now here comes the line that proves Rabbi Yochanan, because now they explain that line. And the one difference would be the nara murasa. The braita says that that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said. But now, after asking this question, Rabbi Yochanan, that we had about the Chenek case, we answered that there was another nafkamina. So the Gemara says, why don't we bring up that case of a woman who had a chuppah but not yet married? That would also be one we'd have to judge by us. So they answer, and we'll finish with this. Hi, Tana to Menashe, Yehuda Amar komitam mural b'nei Noach enu el chenek idi cheneku. If you hold like Tana to Menashe that we mentioned earlier, not the first one we saw, but the second one we saw today, that it's chenek, then it's the same thing. By a Gentile, it would be chenek. By a Jew, it would be chenek. So it would make a difference, because either which way it would be chenek, it would be side. And then you don't have to say that that's a difference. And that would resolve that question. Okay, so what did we do today? We started with the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach of b'nei Menashe. We started with b'nei Menashe. We ended with the Tana to b'nei Menashe. We had the 7 mitzvot. Yeah, what are his sources? We got to who gets which 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. Which of them do you get killed for? We had 3, which we rejected, 4, and then 7. Okay, and what did Rav really say? Everyone had a different approach. Then we had some questions that came off of that. We got into the whole thing about the gezel and chayotzebo and the eshet yefat toar and differences between Jew to Gentile and Gentile to Gentile or Gentile to Jew. And then we got into this braita about a Ben Noach is killed in a different way. There's different criteria. There's different court system. And then we went into all the sources for that. We had 3 questions off that. And then we got into this last thing about the Giloy Arayot and how, again, there's some cases where a Gentile will be judged in the Jewish system. And we ended up saying, really, it's the one issue of the Nara Murasa. And with that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day, and we should hear good news.